here. We will have folks joining, I'm sure, as we go along here, but welcome everybody to today's town hall and advocacy training. I am pausing to see if Nicole's joining us, but she said she's dealing with the situation. So Nicole's not going to be here, I think. She might join us later. But welcome. Yeah, we've got Jennifer Miller with us. She is CALA's lobbyist and worked with us here over this last session. And it was a very busy session again.
You get from that light out.
Last couple of years have been a little bit crazy. And so it was monumental having her help us out this year. So we'll talk about some education stuff coming up and some other call of business when she gets completed. But I think we'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Jennifer, and get started with your training. If you have questions, let me know in the chat as we go, and I'll help Jennifer moderate those, and we'll try to get those answered as we go along. All right, all you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everybody. I can't see very many of you. I wish I could see more of you, but it's nice to be here with you. Just by way of introduction, my name is Jennifer Mello. My firm is called August Policy Strategies. I am what they call a contract lobbyist at the state capitol. So I have a number of clients. I do a lot of work in healthcare and education and just kind of some general business stuff. Obviously, CALA is one of my clients, and we just started that arrangement. Gosh, it's not even been a full year. So I am still getting up to speed on all the issues and all the details. My role for you all is not, I mean, I don't know how to do your jobs, and thank you all for doing your jobs. I would be terrible at them, I'm sure. But my job is to kind of understand the politics and the process and help maximize the chances of you guys getting what you need and what you want for your businesses. So, and I am totally happy to be informal. So if you have questions as we go along, that works great. I will rely on Peter to tell me if there's a question, because otherwise, I'm not great at tech. So we're going to be lucky if I can get through the presentation without messing that up, let alone monitoring the chat box. But feel free to pop anything in chat as we go, and I'm happy to pause. So here we go. See? Oh, there we go. Yay! Oh, I did it. Sorry, not very professional, but I'm excited. I think one of the things that's really important in the work that we do together is for you all to understand the larger context. Your day-to-day lives are in assisted living. Again, you are the experts there. You know all about that. My guess is you spend a lot of time thinking about and talking to other people about assisted living. I mean, it's what you do. That is true of about 5,000 other groups of people in the state of Colorado, and obviously made that number up. But we all come at this from a fairly narrow perspective, and those points of view really are important. But it's important to understand kind of how they fit into the larger process. So, with your patients, I am going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of that. Colorado, the point of this particular slide is that this is a very, very democratically controlled state right now. Obviously, Governor Jared Polis won re-election last fall. The governor is interesting where he lies on the political spectrum. He actually can be quite libertarian, which seems like it's conservative at times. But by and large, he is a Democrat, and he is a Democrat from Boulder, and he cares about and supports the things that Democrats from Boulder care about. In the House, you see all those blue dots. We have a huge majority of Democrats. It's the largest majority, certainly in my lifetime. It may be the largest majority ever. It is a 2/3 majority, which matters because the Democrats, if they wanted to, could override a gubernatorial veto. I don't think that's going to happen right now, but you need 2/3 to do that, which is why it's always a margin that people shoot for. And then the Senate, it's a little bit closer, but not much. We only have 12 Republicans in the Senate. So you don't have to count those numbers. We have 12 Republicans in the Senate and 19 in the House, which means we have a total of 33 Republicans in the building. So 2/3 of the members are Democrats. Why am I spending a bunch of time talking about politics? Because elections matter. They really do. And when people win elections and when they win them as decisively, collectively, as the Democrats did in 2022, that has implications for policy. They are more liberal. They are going to push for more liberal types of policies. The Democrats, their strongest constituencies are environmental groups, unions, trial lawyers. And so it's not a surprise for those of us who do this for a living that when we see these margins of Democratic control, we see a lot of proposals coming from groups like that are successful. It is almost impossible to kill a Democratic bill. Now, not impossible, but almost impossible because of these numbers. And it's a challenging environment if you're coming at it from a business community perspective, it's a pretty challenging environment. And I work with groups all over the country and all over the state. And I'm belaboring this point a little bit because I think it's important to understand that Colorado is just super, super liberal right now. Our legislature is very, very liberal. And that influences every single thing that happens. It influences what gets introduced, what gets passed, what doesn't get introduced, what doesn't get passed, and all of that. So, and that's not to say CALA's issues, you guys aren't partisan in your issues, but to the extent that your issues are consistent with Democratic priorities, great, that's good news for us. To the extent they're more consistent with Republican priorities right now, that's not such great news. So that's why I talk about the political situation. Okay, sorry. I promise I won't get excited every time I manage to change the slide. I'll try to dial it back now. This is a word cloud that is taken from the titles of legislation from the 2023 session. I think it's just a helpful visual for you to see what the legislature is really focused on, right? So, I mean, it's interesting to see how big the words and so the bigger words are the ones that are more frequent in titles. You see right there, health, tax, education are really big. You see some smaller words, marijuana over up in the upper left-hand corner. It's not huge, but the fact that it even shows up on the word cloud tells you how many bills reference marijuana. So again, this is just a tool to get a sense. I will note that you don't see anywhere on here assisted living. Don't think you see anything about elderly, although I can't see the whole thing right now because of the screen. There's the word medical shows up a little bit. Again, context and understanding kind of where and how we fit in the process is important. Okay, so in 2023, we were coming off of the 2022 election, which was very surprising at those big margins of Democrats I talked about. None of us thought they were going to win those many seats. So this was an adjustment process. But in addition to that, we had a really big number of new members in the legislature this year. There were 33 individuals who had never served in the legislature before. The reason that matters is because, like anything in life, it takes time to learn how to do it and to do it well. And a lot of those newly elected legislators kind of acknowledge that, and they're listening and they're learning and they're working to get their feet under them. Some of them would not acknowledge that they have anything to learn, and those may be the ones that are a little more challenging for us to work with. But it takes them longer to do everything. It takes them longer to draft their bills. It takes them longer to introduce their bills. Trust me, it takes them longer when they present their bills. So it has an impact on the process overall. One of the dynamics we saw, particularly in the House this year, was, so again, you've got those 19 Republicans versus all those Democrats. because they don't have the votes to change legislation very often, to change the policy, they used stalling tactics. We hear about the filibuster in Congress. They essentially did the equivalent of a filibuster on, boy, all kinds of things. I mean, even things they supported, because their whole goal was just to make it take as long as possible, and frankly, make it as painful as possible. From their perspective, being in the minority, they don't want very much to pass. And so if they can slow things down and make it so that we run out of time and things just don't pass at the end, that's exactly that's great news from their perspective. Um, so that was kind of the House Republican tactic. And I, in describing that, am in no way either supporting it or saying it's a bad thing. It's a legitimate tactic that the minority uses. The Democrats used it when they were in the minority. It's one of the few things you can do when you're in the minority is you can have an impact on the clock. My little cute little bullet there that says slowing it down, or a better way. The Senate Republicans, I think, took a different approach. They rarely filibustered. They worked more behind the scenes to try to achieve change. And I wasn't there for those conversations, obviously. My guess is it was kind of a, well, we can talk about this until 4 in the morning, or you guys can take these three amendments and then we can all go home at 10. And they did a lot more of that in the Senate. And I think it was frankly more effective in terms of their policy goals and what they wanted to achieve. So two different approaches there, with the Republicans being in the minority. We make a big deal at the Capitol about stakeholding. It's such a big deal, we've turned it into a verb, right? And that basically means talking to the people that are going to be impacted by a piece of legislation. Your policy committee can tell you that there was not a very robust stakeholding process this year on a couple of different bills. And I'm going to get into the specific legislation in a minute, but it was very common this year that bills just got introduced and they hadn't talked to anybody that they would impact. We're pushing back against that just from a process perspective. That's really challenging. Our legislature moves really fast. They have to be done in 120 days. And I'll tell you, when you get a 100-page bill and it's in committee 2 days later, it is really hard to have a good policy conversation about it. So one of the challenges we faced this session, and I think this did impact CALA in particular, was just less commitment to doing adequate stakeholdering before introduction, and even as bills were working through the process. I'm sure you all are very smart people who are very engaged, so you probably have seen some of the bigger issues. The legislature spent a lot of time talking about guns this year, a lot of time talking about reproductive rights, criminal justice, environment and energy, and housing. Note that healthcare is not on that list. Again, in assisted living, issues that impact elderly folks, not on that list. This is what the legislature is primarily focused on right now. Okay, I promise I'm not gonna spend a bunch of time boring you with budget and budget numbers. I wanna just remind you all that we have something in our state called the Taxpayers Bill of Rights, or TABOR. It's part of our Constitution. And what it says is that the government can only keep so much money. So tax rate is whatever the tax rate is. It happens to be 5% right now on income tax in Colorado. I think it's 5%. Don't quote me on that. So that's the tax rate. We all pay our taxes. They add up the number. If that number is above a certain threshold that's determined based on population growth and inflation, the government doesn't keep that money. They give it back to all of us. And over the years, the legislature's found a whole bunch of different ways to return it to taxpayers. Most of you probably got that $700 check last year. That was your TABOR refund. That was money that the state government had to send back to taxpayers that wasn't able to be spent on any government programs. The budget right now is tight and it's getting tighter. I'm not going to read this quote out loud, but this is a quote from the chair of the Joint Budget Committee, Senator Rachel Zenzinger, who, by the way, has been a great friend to CALA and really gets and supports our issues. Basically warning, it's going to get harder. We are at the end of the enhanced federal match for Medicaid. The pandemic money, it hasn't necessarily all been spent, but it's all been allocated. There are not pots of federal money sitting around waiting for people to figure out what to do with them. And there are lots of pressures on the state budget. again, context, right? So like getting a little bit out of our bubble and understanding where other folks are coming from. I tell you, every single person who works in K-12 thinks that that system is underfunded. So does every person who works in the higher education system. And we have a lot of conversations in higher ed about how much money is the state going to contribute, because whatever they don't contribute essentially gets made up in tuition. So when tuition goes up at our in-state institutions, it's related to the size of the investment the legislature has either been able to or has decided to make. Transportation, I've lived in Colorado almost my whole life. I've seen a lot of the growth. I don't know, many of you may be the same, but it's hard out there sometimes. I mean, we have a problem with our roads. We don't have enough of them, and traffic is terrible, and there's potholes everywhere. Housing, and particularly affordable housing, is a huge challenge in this state. Lots and lots of people cannot afford where they live or afford to live in a place where they would want to live. Our state employees, when you give state employees a modest raise, I think, a 2 or 3%, which in this inflationary climate is really not even keeping pace with inflation, that has a big impact on the budget. You multiply that across every state employee, and that has an impact. Our retirement system for our public employees is desperately underfunded. It's a big looming problem. So those issues impact the budget. And then finally, when it comes to Medicaid, which I know is more, many of you, I know not all of you, but many of you work with Medicaid. The number of people on Medicaid certainly has a big impact, and that number has gone up and up and up. Now, with some of the changes because of the COVID emergency expiring, it'll be interesting to see what happens with our Medicaid population. Essentially, the state was prohibited from disenrolling anybody since COVID hit. Now they have to go through and figure out if people are still eligible or not. Regardless of what it does to the size of the Medicaid population and how that impacts the budget, I can tell you it's going to be a pretty chaotic process. I have zero faith that the Department of Healthcare Policy and Finance will do this smoothly or well. So if you do have Medicaid residents, you might want to be aware that there's a redetermination of eligibility coming down the pike, and it may be complicated. We talk a lot about I hear this a lot. Why can't the state just, subsidize assisted living more? Or we just need to raise Medicaid rates, or we shouldn't have to pay licensing fees. That should be under the state budget. I get where those desires are coming from. The reason why it's really hard to achieve those, almost impossible in some cases, is because of everything I just went through, which is why I wanted to share that information with you. Let me pause there real quick. And Peter, is there anything, because I'm going to go now more into some of the specific legislation, but I just want to see if there's any questions about the general stuff I've talked about.
Yeah, just one kind of general question. Do you think a more liberal government is less favorable to small business, or is that just stereotype?
I think yes is the answer. I'll make it simple. Yes. I mean that is based on my own experience. Now, listen, this is politics. And so everybody gets their own opinion. You might get a different answer from a different person. But I think that liberal policies, which are the policies most often embraced by Democrats, are not great for small businesses frequently. All right. So I keep going, Peter. I'm just watching your face to tell me yes. Okay, great. Great. So there were 5 bills that we tracked pretty carefully for CALA this year. I'm going to work through those real quick just so you can see some of the specific, I've talked a lot about generalities and concepts. This is where the rubber really meets the road. House Bill 23-1030, we supported this bill. It did pass. Many of you probably had experience with these healthcare staffing agencies during COVID, right? They really came into their own and became quite important during the COVID pandemic. But they often came with conditions that said, you couldn't hire their people. That is no longer allowed for certain types of employees. So it's not for all employees. It's for anybody who has a nursing type of license. So that includes a CNA, includes a nurse, but it doesn't include oh, no, I'm not going to be able to come up with a good example. It doesn't include anybody who's not somehow in that nursing licensure change. So if you're working with a temporary company and they're trying to say you can't hire one of their people in that area, you can now. I see Janet came off mute. Did you have an example for me to share?
Yeah, we had talked about this and I was confused. It does not include QMAP employees, and that's the term you were looking for. Yeah.
Thank you, Janet. Okay, thank you. So that's a great example.
That's what
So,
most of us would like to recruit is QMAPs, but it did not include them because they don't have a professional license. They have a certificate. So
thanks, Janet. That's really, really helpful. So, and the bill as introduced would have included all of those employees. This is an example of, sometimes to get stuff through, you've got to compromise. We did not initiate this piece of legislation, but again, we did support it and we testified on behalf of it and worked to pass as strong of a bill as it possibly could. Senate Bill 40, staffing agency caps checks. It was really a pretty small bill. We supported it. Just essentially ensures that those caps checks are happening. I'll spend a little more time talking about Senate Bill 63, assisted living residences referrals. Again, we did not initiate this bill. I want to be really clear about that. This bill was initiated by some of the national placement companies, A Place for Mom being the most prominent amongst them. And what they were, in their words, they were looking to kind of create a more even playing field between national and local referral agencies. I'm just telling you how they described it. I'm not taking a position on whether or not that's what it did. We got engaged. They came to us and they really wanted, this is an example of stakeholdering where they did come to us and they came to us before the bill was introduced and they said, we'd like you guys to be okay with this. Can you read it and tell us if you want changes? We did negotiate for a number of changes that I think had the bill passed would have been really good for consumers, including that they weren't allowed to send a referral on without your permission, and clarifying so that if you got a referral for one individual from two different entities, making it clear that you only had to pay one of those, not both. My understanding is there's sometimes pressure to pay both. So we were clarifying that. The bill actually did not pass. So none of the great changes that we negotiated became law. And I think it didn't pass in large part because of the opposition of some of the more locally oriented referral agencies. And some of you may work in that business or may be really familiar with it. They were able to basically count enough votes to make sure the bill wasn't going to get through. So it died in its first committee. Senate Bill 155, sunset of continuing nursing home administrators. I think I won't go into the detail of what a sunset means, but if someone really cares, you can put it in the chat. Why do I have a bill on here about nursing home administrators? Well, because the same license for nursing home administrators applies to some assisted living administrators. And in one of its versions, this bill would have increased the training requirements for those folks. I think many of you may be those folks. It would have required some specific training around Alzheimer's and memory care and dementia. Senator Zenzinger really went to bat for the industry and got that language taken out of the bill. So you don't need to worry about that. That's not changing as a result of this bill, but that's an example of, sometimes there's bills that we don't think directly impact us, but we always have to be, it's just part of my job for you all is to have that broader view and be able to see across all the different things that are happening and saying, I get that this is about nursing homes, but this actually does impact us. And, here's my concern. And then we talk as a group. Do we share this concern? Yes. And so then we go try to do something about it. I'll spend the most time talking about Senate Bill 261, the Direct Care Workforce Stabilization Board. This bill did pass. Again, we were heavily engaged in this bill. We had an amend position, which amend is kind of between support and opposition. It's kind of neutral, depends on, amend can mean a couple of different things. What we meant is we really wanted changes to this bill. And we got some of them. We didn't get everything we wanted. What the bill does is create this Direct Care Workforce Stabilization Board within the Department of Labor and Employment. And it's super specific about who's going to serve on this board. And this board is essentially tasked with doing research into the conditions for the direct care workforce and making recommendations about how to improve those, including recommendations about what people should be paid. It's not a requirement about what people should be paid, but I think when you have a quasi-governmental entity like this, when they get to the end of their work, which will be 2 or 3 years, issuing, people should be paid X, Y, and Z. I think that's going to put pressure on the wage market and on the labor market, which is the intention of the proponents. Part of why we took an amend position on this bill is, and again, that your representatives that I work with made it really clear that most of you wish you could pay your direct care folks more. That these people are really important to your business and the work that you do. You really value what they do. And it would be great if the economics of the business were such that that you could pay them more. So we didn't want to come out in opposition because we didn't want to oppose trying collectively to do better by the folks who work in these really important jobs. We did, however, work hard to. One of the things we tried to do that we were not successful in was limit the amount of data collection that this entity was able to do. As passed, it's got broad authority to collect information directly from workers. You guys don't have any requirements about what you have to provide. You may get asked for data, but nothing's mandated. But I think in some ways this was really the heart of the bill, because part of this bill was, the main proponent was the Service Employees International Union. They had a huge national goal to unionize this workforce. They have struggled to do that because it's kind of a diffuse workforce, right? It's not like an Amazon warehouse where there's 500 people at the Amazon warehouse. This is spread across much more sparsely across a variety of businesses. Once they have their contact information, they will absolutely use that to try and unionize them. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, I think depends on where you start in the equation. I think from your policy committee's perspective, they are concerned about that long-term goal. One of the things we did was make sure that there was adequate industry representation on this direct care stabilization board, so that the industry voice was there and could really provide some of the balancing information. I think, I don't know, I'd love for there to be a board that said lobbyists should get paid more. You all would probably love that too. There's reasons why we all get paid what we do. And I don't know, some of them may be fair, some of them may not be, but the economics of the business, we thought it was really important that this board understand, at least have to consider as part of their work, what the economics of the industry are and how it operates, and why these folks don't get paid more than right now, and what it would mean if they did get paid more, and how we might go about doing that. Are there other ways we could support this workforce that aren't necessarily wage increases, Medicaid eligibility, things like that? We wanted to make sure all of those were part of the conversation, and making sure that Medicaid rates were part of it was another one of our big issues. We did succeed in that. For those of you who take Medicaid, the reimbursement rates are woefully inadequate, and that's part of the problem. That's part of the challenge. To ignore that, to have a state entity studying this issue and ignore that, just seemed ludicrous to us, and frankly not helpful in the long run to anybody, the workers or the businesses. You can't just pretend that reality doesn't exist, that we have really low Medicaid reimbursement rates, and that has an impact on how all of this works and comes together. We never switched positions because while we did make some change, we did get some changes, they weren't enough, we thought, to go to a support position or even a neutral position on the bill. Our next steps are, I'm watching the formation of this board very carefully. We will work to get an assisted living voice on that stabilization board to keep us at the table through those conversations. There's a couple of things going on right now that some of you may be familiar with, and we can talk more in detail about any of these things. Government affairs is not just the legislature, there's also the regulatory process, right? And I know you all, I'm sure you work closely with CDPHE, and I'm sure you value your partnerships with the agency, but they have a lot of power, frankly, over different aspects of your business. There's a conversation happening right now about licensing fees. The department feels like they need to increase those fees in order to be able to continue the work they do. We have said we're not so sure the work you do right now is the work you're supposed to be doing, and we're not so sure you're doing it the most efficient way. And we're not super excited about paying more money so that you can just keep doing things not really the greatest way. So that's kind of the position we've taken in that. I know there's a lot of concern about Medicaid reimbursements. I wish we could do more about that. I will tell you, I think that's the hardest needle to move on this particular chart. And this is a little bit related to the licensing fee. There has been an increase, at least we know this anecdotally, I'm not sure what data we have, but the use of IJs, which are immediate jeopardy. See, did not know anything about IJs 6 months ago. I do learn as I go. And apparently surveyors from CDPHE have dramatically increased their use of IJs, which has lots of implications for you all in your businesses when they're out there doing their surveys. So those are things that CALA is aware of and we're working on in different ways kind of as we speak. And I think those are the issues that we'll be carrying forward into the next legislative session for us. Again, Peter, let me pause there because I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we can do about this and advocacy next. Let me see if there's any questions about what I've just shared.
Yeah, nothing right now. Any questions, folks?
Can we ask it? Just ask the question. I'm sorry. I just got brand new glasses. My name is Chris. I'm going to be a new administrator, but I've been a healthcare professional for a long time. I've been involved legislatively, indirectly. I was the Park County rep for the Area Agency on Aging Regional Advisory Committee for several years. And then I was their chair for the funding. So what's happening with Medicaid is a serious concern for me because that's the avenue I want to go into as an administrator. And we automatically stumbled across the state wanting to have paid in consulting firm to introduce a possible 3-tier Medicaid reimbursement system with all kinds of questions around that. So I personally am very concerned about what's going to happen with the Medicaid pathway. We know that there are not enough beds for the people in need. It seems to me that more favorable support is running towards the large box house, the community where a senior buys in, instead of it being on the other end where the population is growing. There's people over the age of 65 not changing. And then we have to deal with the fact that, yes, right now, the most of the cash in our country is with people over the age of 55. That is quickly changing. So I have a deep concern for Medicaid issues with this. And the only way that I know of how to change it is to approach it legislatively. And if there is a law called the Older Americans Act, and a big part of that is supportive of rural locations and aging in place. And if indeed that is a part of how our government's supposed to operate in the state, then approaching it legislatively, even as a lobbyist, there is already a foundation for that. Even if it's not their prime baby for this session, it still has a lot of strong base to support it. And so I guess my question is, yes, we understand that it's a concern. Clearly we're seeing, and what you're presenting, Jennifer, is that it's not a favorite topic, but the concern is there, and the law, there are laws behind it to support it. So my concern is the next step for that.
It's a great question and a great point. And I want to be really clear. We're very concerned about Medicaid. Some of the information I presented before demonstrated that Medicaid was not a big issue for the legislature this year, right? And that does change over time is the other thing, right? So some years they are more focused on healthcare and Medicaid. Unintentionally, I think you provided me the perfect segue into this last slide, which this is how we start to do something about it, right? So yes, the reimbursement rates are a problem. All kinds of things in Medicaid are challenging. We care about that. Here's how we start being able to do something about that. And you're right, the legislature is ultimately the place where that happens. So all of this builds up to that. So I will talk a little bit about that and tell you that honestly, the best thing you can do if you care about these issues, you care about the industry, you want to get involved, is develop relationships with the state senator and the state representative from from where you live and where you work. Those may be different places, and that can be a good thing because then you can talk to more people. You may have more than one location and you can talk to more people that way. The goal is when I'm up at the Capitol in April and all of a sudden a terrible bill has gotten dropped, you have enough of a relationship with your state senator that you can call that person and that person knows who you are. They're going to say, oh, Janet, yes, Janet always gives me great information about assisted living issues. I'm going to listen to her. I'm going to talk to her. That doesn't mean we can persuade everybody, but it's that ability to get through, I think, is the end goal. And the other key part of that, and I'm going to go back and talk in more detail, but is telling us what you're doing or keeping us in that loop, because we can't use it as part of our larger strategy to achieve all of these goals if we don't know what's happening, right? So it's both developing those relationships and then making sure we're working together on that. We've got good communication loops. I'm seeing a couple of hands raised right now, so maybe we can call on those folks, and then I'll talk more about some of the ways to build relationship.
Janet?
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm still muted. I
No, you're good.
didn't know in the beginning when I was involved in all this, sometimes an amend position is the best solution, you know, because my personality is want to kill them all, you know, any bill that mentions assisted living, just get in there and kill them, you know. And I learned from working with you, Jennifer, sometimes that's not your smartest way to go about it. Because one of those was the bill has such strong backing, your chances of getting it killed are slim but none. And then one other one, you said sometimes you can add things to the bill that are favorable to you. So I just thought maybe you could elaborate so other people understand why sometimes CALA is not going to run in there and try to kill the bill, even though that's what we want really, but it's not realistic, you know.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. And there are times when we oppose legislation. I want to be clear about that. I'm not saying we can't oppose things. I think we take every bill on its own merits, right? We look at the policy, how much of an impact it's going to have. And then I have to look at the politics on your behalf and give you my best advice as to what's achievable. The challenge with, if there is a bill that's backed by a major constituency that has a ton of support in the Democratic caucus, it's going to be real hard to get it to go away. And if you just come out opposed, what happens is they don't talk to you. So it's this trade-off between, we wish this would go away because we don't think, we're playing the odds here. Maybe it goes away, but the odds are it's not going to go away. So how do we make it better? And that amend position allows us to get in there and have those conversations. I really believe in the power of relationships and developing relationships, and amend strategy helps us with that, because we can go to people and say, look, we don't like your bill. We really don't like your bill. Here's the things we'd like to talk to you about in it, and here's why. And it just allows for you to engage in a conversation, and that's the beginning of building relationship, that then helps, because it's all the same people next year, just a different set of bills, but it's the same people you're talking to. And so when you've developed that rapport, it's really helpful too. Did that help, Janet?
Yeah, that was perfect, because you know, and I didn't know that in the beginning, that once you oppose the bill, you're out of the conversation. You know, they don't want to speak to you. And if you become real heavy-handed, pretty soon you're kind of out of the game in a lot of different avenues, you know.
Yeah. And again, it depends on the bill and the dynamics of every given bill, right? So I want to be I don't want you all to think we're a bunch of wimps who are scared to oppose bills. That's not it at all. And there are times when I think a straight up opposed strategy is right. We got to consider what's happening with every single piece of legislation and then make that decision. Someone named Janelle, I think.
Yeah, Janelle?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
Go Nuggets, yay. That's a good thing for today. Just had to put that in there. So one of my, we're talking about some of the stuff that you had said that, that IJs, the surveys, trying to increase the license fees. So my concern is, and I don't know how we do this, is a lot of these things aren't going to be able to change for years. I mean, we are already going to they're going to talk about the license increase. It's already going to hit before we can get legislation in. We know in 2024, from the bill from last year, the $10,000 fines and above are going to go in before we, that already passed in legislation. And I think that the frustrating part of that was like Janet said, we really didn't know what was going on, you know, as far as the billing being amended. Some of the amendments, you know, we went back and they amended the bill. It's like, oh, shoot, we didn't want them to do that. You know, they amended it and that made it worse instead of better. So I guess my position is, or question is the timing. A lot of these things are going to go through before we even get to legislation. And what can we do? I mean, I know there's maybe not a lot we can do, but maybe some guidance on what we all can do, because CDPHE seems to be able to make their own rules and their own requests and do it how and when they have whatever they want, no matter, you know, no matter what. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, a way that we can work with them or around it. To be honest, we've already tried working with them and that didn't go. I mean, it went for a while. It didn't go good, but just a little guidance of what we can do. Cause you're right. CDPHE does have a lot of power. And even though we're doing legislation, they are still able to set fees, give IJs. So just some thought on that. I guess just putting it out there and maybe some guidance.
Yeah,
They're tired of taking care of you, and that it's not fair that they have to.
Thank you for muting. Yeah, Janelle, really good questions. Let me start with the legislation and the $10,000 fines. You know, that is statute, and you're right. We can't do anything to change that. We wouldn't be able to do anything to change that until January of next year at the earliest. And honestly, I don't know that we could change it at the legislature. And I know that's frustrating, but it's my job to kind of tell you, I think that would be really challenging fight. Doesn't mean we can't have it. I do think it's up to 10,000. And I think that's probably important to note. I'm not as familiar with the latest kind of day-to-day on that, but the legislation was not a 10,000 fine, it was up to 10,000. So, you know, I don't know if that's any comfort at all, probably not, but in terms of the licensing fees, you're right that CDPHE does have the statutory authority to set those fees. However, luckily, there is a component of statute that says they cannot raise them more than the cost of living has gone up without legislative approval. And so that's really where we have our leverage, frankly. And we're just, we just finished session. We're just getting started kind of thinking through our strategy and our priorities for next year. But I don't think the legislature also has to approve. It's kind of weird. They don't approve the specific fees, but they have to approve the spending authority for the agency. There's a couple of different legislative levers I think we have where we can go in and say, look, we get it. The way that Colorado works, partly because some of the things I talked about before, is that the people being regulated pay for that regulation. We understand that. However, you know, we're not sure that they're doing this the right and best way. And we don't want to be funding something that's frankly not the right and best way. And I don't mean to sound vague. It's just that we're like literally in the midst of trying to figure some of this out. But I think where we're headed is trying to figure out what levers do we have at the General Assembly where legislators have to be involved in this fee increase thing, and how do we use those to get what we need, and either delay the fee increase, have some work done some independent work to say how many surveyors we really need and how they should be funded, what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. Those are the kind of things that we're considering or headed in that direction. Is that helpful?
I think it is, but I also think that my concern is the damage is already going to be done before, you know, we get it there. I mean, they're already talking about the increasing, you know, the licensing fees because they need more surveyors. And they said that the surveyors have to be able to they have to be able to compete with other nurses in the industry. And if you look at their hiring criteria, it does not require you to have a nursing degree. So there's some of these things that are going on that, you know, like it falls down, and bottom line, it falls down to the residents because small homes close down and they have nowhere to go.
Right.
And I think we have to do something about the power that CDPHE has in regard to the surveyors. And they are able to make or break a person. I did copy the part of the legislation where it talks about the fines, and I did put it in the link. So they can go over $10,000 if they figure it's egregious enough, and the fines will be determined by CDPHE. So another part of legislation, we should have some more input in that. I know these are all things that are problems now, and I know they're things that we're looking to fix in the future. My concern is the future. We've got to do something in this next session. We can't wait another year and another year and another year. So I think it's good that we email and communicate, but I think we also need to know what's our battle? Which one is our biggest battle? What do we want to go after? What is the one that we want to put all of our energies into? So I just think that going forward, that's something that we need to discuss as a group and figure out, where are we going to put that energy in, which one of these situations?
Yeah, a couple of comments in response. One, you're right, we do have to prioritize because we can't do everything, and that's, unfortunate. I mean, Excel Energy spends $1 million a year on lobbying. If you have that budget, yeah, you probably can do lots of things. That's not CALA's budget, and that's okay, but it does mean that we have to be strategic and be smart about how we prioritize. I know that CDPHE is putting a lot of pressure on you all from a timing perspective. That is because they are responsible to the governor's office, and that's the governor's office budget timelines. I don't believe that statutorily they can raise those fees higher than the cost of living until after the legislative session next year. And I could be wrong about that, and we can all look into this. I understand the time sensitivity there, but I don't think they have the statutory ability to raise the fees as much as they want to before we go through another session. And that's what gives us leverage. And it gives us leverage not just over the fees and what those are going to be, but also around some of these survey and these IJ issues. They're related. So that's kind of a short version of it. Let me just talk a little bit, go back to the advocacy and what and how we go about doing that. I started with kind of point number one, and then I went all to the bottom to the last point. Getting to know your folks one-on-one is the most important thing, and keeping us in that loop so that we're aware of what's going on is critical to that. How do you go about developing a relationship with the legislature? First, don't be scared. Really, they are people just like you. Some of them are nice, some of them are mean, some of them are smart, some of them are dumb. Some of them have little kids, some of them are retired. I mean, they're people, just like it's like when you go to the grocery store, right? You see all kinds of different people. That's the same thing with the legislature. And I think you treat them like people, both from the sense of don't be intimidated, but also in the sense of kind of showing up some respect. So I guarantee that not a single one of you would call me tomorrow and say, we are meeting at 10 o'clock and you have no choice about it. And I don't care what you have going on. And I don't care if your kid has a doctor's appointment. That's what's happening. We don't talk to other people that way, typically. Maybe our spouses, maybe we shouldn't. I don't know. That's a whole other thing. But, so when you call your legislator, they're a human being too, right? Maybe they're on vacation. Maybe they have a childcare emergency. All of those things can happen, and just be human about it. Just be a real human person like you would with anybody else, right? So understand that they've got realities, they've got pressures that they're dealing with, as do you. And the goal is to find the place where you can fit together. I don't know any legislator who's going to say no to a request for a one-on-one meeting this time of year. I'm sure there's probably a few, unfortunately, but I think it's going to be very rare. And to say, hey, I'd love to go have a cup of coffee with you and talk about the challenges that I'm having as a small assisted living provider. And this is a really important service in our community, and I'm really worried. And here's the things I'm worried about. I think I would be surprised if it was difficult to have those conversations. So that's my first suggestion. And if you need help getting in touch with your legislators, let us know. We can certainly help you with that. The other, and so that's kind of step one. But then it's about developing relationship, right? So the other thing is, we all have what we call Christmas card friends, right? So there's those people that we don't really talk to very much. And, we just exchange Christmas cards once a year. Don't be Christmas card friends. Don't be the person who calls them once a year and is saying, here's what I want from you, or here's what's not working. It's got to be more than that in order to keep that to be a real relationship. Ways you can do that. You can go to their town halls and their events. Trust me, they love having people at their town halls. Get on their mailing list. They all have one. And then you'll get more emails than you want, probably, about all the different opportunities where you can go interact with them. You can offer to give a tour of your facility. I think that's a really powerful. We've done that in a couple places in the Metro Denver area in the last few years, and it's memorable to people. It's when they can see it and put the visual on it and depending on circumstances, meet some of the residents, and it's really powerful, and it sticks with them in a different way than a cup of coffee, which is also important. But how many cups of coffee do we have with people, right? So it becomes more memorable. You can just stay in touch by email, every so often. Hey, I saw this article. I thought this might be interesting to you. Or I just want to let you know, you were worried about so-and-so, and I wanted to let you know we got that situation resolved, or, whatever, it's a little bit, you can make stuff up a little bit. And the point is just to keep that continual communication. There's probably a million other ways you can do that. I don't have any of them other listed. I would say, think about it as, how would you develop, if you go to church and there's somebody at your church that you want to become friends with, what would you do? How would you do that? Or, if you have kids in school and you want to be friends with one of the other moms, how would you go about doing that? Those are the same types of tools and techniques you can bring to the table in terms of building those relationships with legislators. When you all are able to do that work, then we're able to roll it up, right? Part of us being more effective, which would have been, I know, really wonderful for you all back in 2022 when that really particular challenging piece of legislation was going through, is having lots of people we can go to and having those effective relationships and being that trusted source. And we need to build that component of our work in order to be more successful. So I think that's part of why your policy committee was really wanting to, and your board really wanted to make sure I emphasize this particular point about advocacy and your role in that, and that we really do need your help. And that is actually my last slide. So I am happy to continue to do any questions.
Other questions, thoughts, things you'd like to see us doing from a legislative standpoint?
Yeah, this is Janelle. Sorry, I'm going to chime in again. We were told in the last legislative session, not the last one, but last year, Democrats are not going to go against Democrats and Republicans aren't going to go against Republicans. So if you have a bill that is presented by a Democrat and you have a vote, if we've got more Democrats than Republicans, pretty much it's going to win. That is a little bit concerning to me. And also in the 2022, when we had people that were on the board that were voting, and they were asking the question, what is the difference between an assisted living and a nursing home? That's pretty scary when these people are voting for the party rather than voting on what the facts are. And how is a way that we can work around that? I mean, we can meet with people. I understand we can get to know them, but if they're not going to go against their own party, what do we do about that? Do we just go for the amendment of a bill? How would that work?
Well, I know Jennifer will answer this. We have to get them in your facilities. If you have a facility, run one, manage one, get them in there. If you got to say, I'm going to donate $200 to your campaign or $500 to your campaign, come see my facility. They have to see the difference and see what we're doing and the kind of work that we do. We have to educate them. So that's our job.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's right. We do have, and that's when I say building our presence, part of that is educating them. You're right, they don't know the difference. Legislators have to consider about 700 different issues in a given day, and they cannot be experts on everything. And so we have to get out there, help them understand that, give them those visuals. I think that's part of our work together. In terms of the party dynamics, I guess what I would say is generalities, which I used quite a bit of in this, can be unhelpful at times. Every situation is different. And it is not the case that on every bill, every Democrat is going to vote for a Democratic bill or vice versa. It is much more challenging when you have a Democratic bill that has a bunch of Democratic co-sponsors on it, that has a constituency like the unions or the trial lawyers who give the Democrats a bunch of money. That's going to make it harder. It's not impossible. There was a bill that got killed in the House this year in its first committee, which was remarkable, that had to do with scheduling and how they said it was about workers in the restaurant industry. I think it might have applied more broadly, and we had eyes on that for CALA too. Just in terms of like how you schedule your employees and their rights and that, and the other. That bill died. So it's not impossible, but it is, certain circumstances make it more or less challenging. We don't have a lot of political power, and I don't mean to be discouraging in saying that, because we can build it, but we don't have it right now. And that's the work we need to do. That's how we're going to, over time, become more successful.
Janet, did you have another question?
I do. You know what? I had to jump in the car. I kind of overscheduled myself today, but I just need to make a plug for my own little committee here. I'm head of the Government Regulations Committee, and you can also make a difference, and you can join us because
Yes.
it is hard, and it's a huge learning opportunity of how this all works. Things don't happen overnight. It's over time. And I went to a different meeting here recently, and our national arms of assisted living also are challenged with the legislators on a national level to get people to understand the difference between skilled care and assisted living. They can't get the ear of the U.S. senators, the U.S. House of Representatives. They have the same challenge. So I was encouraged that just little Colorado doesn't have that challenge. It's a lot of people. But I would hope that some of you, if you're interested, just contact CALA and come on the committee, and because lots of, how's that saying? Lots of hands make the work light. Peter, you know what that is. You can look it up. Many hands make the work light. I don't know. I don't have that right, obviously, but that we would love to
We lost
hear
you.
from you and build a
there we
strong
go.
voice for assisted living in the next couple of years. If we were where we were now in 2022, that bill may have not passed. We are miles ahead of where we were 2 years ago. So in the education of our members, everything. So I invite you people that want to be involved, get on our committee. I would love to have you.
Yeah, and it goes to, Jennifer loves what she does, I think, and she would love to do it for free, but it's not practical. And which right now we're in the process of renewing dues. So if you are not a member, please join, because it takes funds, and we're not a big association. It's not like we got tons of money just laying around for this kind of stuff, but it takes money to have the staff and to have the people and to have professionals like Jennifer available to help us do this. So renew your dues. Why do we charge for education and events and things? We have to cover those costs, and it's desperate. We need a voice, and part of that voice is everybody's participation. And the more we're involved, and the more that we need people's pocketbooks to to help with that. It's just a fact. So that's my pitch for that. And I think we're transitioning a little bit here, but still open to whatever questions and comments. We have a couple of education events coming up. The main one right now is an emergency preparedness workshop. It's going to be a 4-hour workshop that we're doing online here at the end of the month. We've been working on this for probably at least the last year of trying to get this put together so we can have a more in-depth workshop that's very interactive, where you can you know, have your whole plan right there and work on it and get a lot of work accomplished in that workshop so that you've got all the key things that you need in there and how to avoid, you know, getting tags when you get surveyed, and all those things. So really look out for that. And then thanks to Janet, we recently added a 40-hour administrator course that we've started offering. So she's right in the middle of the first one that we're doing. And we'll do those, you know, probably a couple times a year or more as demand is needed on that. So we're trying to provide the education that you guys need. And we need your ideas. If there's education that you guys want to see us doing that we haven't done, or you want to see again, please let us know that. We want to make sure we're giving you guys what is the most relevant support and education that you need currently right now in your day-to-day operations. And we talked about duals renewals. So I think I've covered most anything. Anything else for Jennifer? Anything else for CALA in general? How can we help you guys, support you? Where are we missing the mark?
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that was wonderful. I think it really gave people a chance to see, especially your little blue and red dots in the arena. I loved that.
Yeah,
I like simple.
in the
But
arena.
that was awesome. I really like that. And you so helped me and you're working with you to understand this process because it is a process, you know? So thank you.
It is. I mean, I often say, I think it's a shame that groups like yours need people like me to do this work, right? I actually don't think that's good for democracy. It would be better if you all, if the system worked in a way where your voices and your expertise were sufficient. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. And so I think there's a lot of work we can do together to make things better. It's probably not going to go as fast as everyone likes, but I'm really excited to keep doing that work with you guys. It's been a fun 6 or 7 months, whatever it's been, and I look forward to more. And I do think that we've got a lot of capacity to build and do more over time.
Well, and I think as we talked about too, having you, we brought you on fairly late in the year last year. And it was kind of a rush leading up to the legislative session. So now that we've kind of got a lay of the land, then we can be much more starting now. Like, let's start talking about what we need to be doing for next year. And
yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Peter.
Early in that process now to be able to do that better and, you know, be able to get to the next session. And again, like you said, prioritize what can we really go for? What do we need to do? And make that happen. And by the way, I just sent you, there was a bill that we ran in 2010 that was for tiered rates, Medicaid tiered rates for assisted living that was supposed to be a pilot program. It got passed and it needed some funding, but it never went anywhere because of the regulatory side of things just didn't make anything happen. So we have some precedents there, at least, of looking at different levels of Medicaid rates for assisted living. So I sent you that. I don't know if that'll be helpful or not in some of the discussions that you can have. It's like, hey, we've passed a bill like this before. It was supposed to be a pilot program. It never.
Yeah,
never.
No, that's great. I do think the long-term solution on Medicaid rates starts with pilot programs. So I'll take a close look at that.
Yeah, let's see if that's helpful. And I think that's it. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your support, and we'll see you down the road.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.